There we go. So again, thank you very much for joining this session. We will have a very, very interesting agenda today, and I will be more than happy to share with you the customer service report 2020 results with all of you tonight. I will be sharing my screen so you can easily follow this presentation, and I would like to encourage everyone to also join this link at mentimeter.com. We will have a few questions for you. The link is provided in the chat by Mark, who is kindly supporting me on the technical side today. So without further ado, I would like to also jump into the slides. And whenever there is a technical problem, please raise your hands in Zoom so we'll be able to see that something doesn't work out or if audio is bad or something like that. But I would like to kick off this session with a little introduction and with a little agenda. We will have the following 4 points we would like to address today. And the most important one is the results of the customer service report 2020, as I mentioned. And then to make it as actionable as possible, we'll strip out a few best practices that we learned over the course of speaking to customer service leaders and leaders in the industry and make them available for you. And in the third point, we would like to also approach some of these best practices using technology and show you how you can actually help the quality in customer interactions before we dive into a Q&A. That's a high-level agenda. And before I start, I just want to quickly mention a few words about ourselves and who we are, so you get a bit of context and what's going on around our company as well. So we are a Zurich-based company, and obviously Zurich in Switzerland, and we work mainly with enterprise customers. We are originally an ETH spin-off, which is the technical university here. So we have a bit of a technical background, and we work closely with Microsoft, being a Microsoft partner. That's very briefly a context of who we are. And I would like to also mention at this point for whom this presentation is going to be relevant. So it's probably most relevant for people who work in customer services or have contact with customers, who also have a strong focus on let's say, customer satisfaction scores. You might be familiar with NPS, Net Promoter Score, or CSAT, but also who have a high ambition to improve quality in customer services. Potentially, this is also going to be more relevant for people who use templates and use a CRM like Zendesk or ServiceNow and Salesforce. All right. That's just a very brief introduction, and let's dive into the actual results and show some of the highlights right now. I'm going to zoom back and forth, and I hope you guys will be able to follow. To give you a little introduction about the structure of the report, we talked to many leaders in the industry in customer services, and we tried to understand where people stand today. What is the current situation, and where do people and leaders, let's say, desire to go? We call this the desired situation. And we also try to understand the challenges people have in between, so we could actually form recommendations in a checklist format at the end of this report to make things as actionable as possible and to make it applicable for you in your everyday life. So, who did we talk to? We talked to, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can read this better. We talked to people in insurance industries and transportation, in the internet, finance and pharma industry predominantly. And the location we covered was Switzerland, Germany, the UK, some people in the US and even Australia. The roles, and you will see that in the results, the roles are the following. People who responded to our interview series were head of customer services, head of complaints, head of contact centers, and the company size was reaching from over 3,000 employees to really large companies with over 200,000 employees. So let's get into the actual content here. And I'd like to kick this off with giving you guys a few highlights that we found in our interview series. It was very, very assuring for us that people told us that customer is still king, right? As a customer service leader, people realize that the differentiating factor between one company and the other is very often the customer service that company is able to provide. And that is directly translating into customer service or into customer satisfaction scores. It was very interesting to see that people in customer services didn't leave any opportunity, let's say, untested to help increase customer satisfaction scores. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that point and also explain to you what this means. A second very interesting theme was automation. It seems that it's here to stay, and adoption rates, however, are not everywhere as high as we would expect. It turns out that technological advancement make it very easy to automate some of the channels, let's say using chatbots, but people didn't express the desire to automate everything. Because if you have a not automated interaction with your customer, let's say a phone call or a direct email, you still have the chance or you still have the opportunity to be able to delight the customer through personal interaction. Right. So that was a bit of a surprise, and I'm going to dive deeper into that point as well. A massive trend that we are seeing is upskilling. It seems that technology keeps changing ever faster, and in order to keep up with it, people express the really, let's say, desire to upskill their teams, to upskill themselves. And the fourth and fifth point are, I think, also very important, but a little bit on the sideline in today's session. So it seems that processes and systems are in a big consolidation. People want to simplify processes. They want to de-risk and, let's say, make historically grown stacks of technology less complex. And in the end, everyone wants to know when you did actually succeed, when you did win. And I'm going to dive into the last point a little bit later as well. So let's have a look at what people and interviewees expressed as their current state. Where do people stand today? What KPIs do they measure? We found out that KPIs are measured on an individual basis. So a lot of things are tracked on an individual basis in customer services. And also, the tracking focuses very much on customer service or customer friendliness metrics and cost metrics, right? And to give you a little bit of a more detailed overview, I would like to emphasize on this chart here. It seems that a lot of activity-related metrics are tracked in customer services, such as the number of requests, but also activities by geography, number of root cause analysis, and so on and so forth. To cover the cost side of customer service department, people focus on measuring average handling times or first contact resolutions. I'm sure that everyone on the call is familiar with these terms. It was very, very surprising for us, though, that the revenue-related metrics, such as the Net Promoter Score or the CSAT, were rather on the short side. So there was not that much measured on this front here, which was very, very surprising for us because people emphasize that the customer is still king, and this was the most important aspect for them. All right, I'm going to skip the tools part here because you can read this in detail. We're going to provide the report to you to read through. That's absolutely not a problem. But I'd like to emphasize on the market trends that we see. So as I mentioned before, automation is here to stay. And the sub-trends of automation that we see is voice recognition. People are going to do analytics on how customer service agents talk with their clients, but also how clients respond. We also see a lot of chatbots and AI triage being employed, and even things going as far as image recognition. To give you a little example, in an insurance case, that might be taking an image of a damage and uploading that, and automated processes can detect whether you would be reimbursed for that damage or not. This is as far as that goes. So that was a very brief overview of the current situation where people reported to be standing. Now I'd like to focus on the next part, which is, where do actually customer service leaders or agents want to go? What's their desires, right? It is again confirmed that customer is still king. Almost half of our interviewees report that customer happiness or client happiness, as measured by NPS or CSAT scores, is their top priority, quickly followed by upskilling staff and consolidating tools and having fewer providers. So that's what we see on the customer focus front. On the cost side of customer service department, we see the large theme of automation being very dominant, with over 1/3 of our interviewees answering or naming this as a top priority. Also, we see improvement of end-to-end processes and again, consolidation of tools. We were quite surprised to see that COVID-related topics were not that relevant. It seems that COVID skipped the customer service departments and didn't impact these leaders and departments too much, luckily. Okay, the next part I want to cover in this presentation is the challenges we are seeing and the challenges people reported to us, being let's say the biggest and the largest roadblocks in people's way to get to their goals. It was interesting to see that slow organizational change was mentioned as one of the most important roadblocks. People reported that organizations are reluctant to change, even if it's for the better. And there's also a lack of skills to change. It seems that it's not that easy to have people onboarded on a change journey. So that was a very important one. The next one I would like to emphasize upon is the, let's say, the complexity of historically grown processes. It seems that there is many custom integration that have been built, there's many vendors, and to bring all that in a coherent process is being reported as very difficult. The last point I would like to talk about in this presentation is the building the basis bucket right here. It seems that there is a lot of potential for staff to be upskilled and also to reduce fluctuation. And one very surprising aspect was that it seems that client communication is an extremely important part of building the basis, right? If you don't get that right, all the processes behind, they tend to break. And with these challenges in mind, I would also look at the time and maybe get into the actionable part of this presentation. What can you do if you are facing the same problems? What can you do to overcome them? And we did compile all of this information in a checklist format at the end of this report, and you can have a look at that and read for yourselves. But I'm going hopefully to spare you some of the reading and dive back into our presentation, give you some visuals of actionable advice and how you can overcome some of these challenges. If you do have questions at this point, I would really love you to save these questions for later for the Q&A part, and also dive into them at a later point. So from all the interviews we conducted in customer services, we compiled, let's say, a few of the best practices there. And I would like to focus on one main part, and this is communication with clients. In order to excel at communication, we've heard the following, let's say, 5 points, and I would like to dive deeper into each of them. It seems that in order to have a great quality of communication, there must be a language guide document which defines the brand voice and also defines certain quality standards of client communication. But this is not enough, because according to that document, these rules need to be followed, and quality in documents, such as maybe templates that you use to answer to customers, they must be adhering to let's say the language guide. Also, upskilling agent and quality assurance are going to be the last topics I would like to cover here, and let's dive into the content here. I hope this will be as actionable as possible, and if you do have questions to these things, also please save them for Q&A. Defining a great communication framework seems to be one of the key pillars of great quality in customer interactions. And I'm sure you are familiar with documents that are so-called language guides. They do define how you treat, let's say, language in many dimensions. One of them is, let's say, how do you approach the different genders? How do you approach maybe different groups? How do you treat technical terms? How do you open and close your communication? So this all needs to be defined in one place, because that is the basis for enforcing quality in customer communications later on. If you are in a position and you don't possess such a language guide, we are providing a free template for you here to download, and you can find this in our follow-up email to this conversation. It's editable, and you can amend things, you can keep stuff that is standardized in there. I hope this is going to be as actionable as possible to you. So why is that even so important? It seems that language is the bridge between people. And if you are not understandable and not clear in your communication, you're going to lose your customers, that's for sure. They simply won't understand what you're trying to convey. So creating a basis for these quality aspects is crucial, right? A language guide must exist in every organization. It must define the requirements for quality, and it must be also followed. However, what we are seeing is the following couple of problems with language guides. These documents may be easily over 100 pages long, and it's very difficult for customer service representatives or even heads of customer service to follow these documents, right? Even if you urge your organization or your department to follow these language guides, it's not that straightforward, because you need to learn and onboard everyone on these documents. So the results are rather poor in this method, because they are simply not followed. Style guides are simply not followed, and it's very costly to upskill your organization onto these. In that sense, we would like in this call to make things very actionable and propose a new method to you. And this method is the following. What if you could digitalize a language guide and make it very easy for everyone to adhere to that language guide, to basically enable every agent to communicate at the quality level that the language guide directs or enforces? This would help you reduce training costs, and would also make sure that the compliance with the language guide is granted, that the quality in customer interactions increases immediately. So how would something like that look? To give you an example of how this might look, we've used the advaisor software to do that, and I'm going to quickly run you through how that works. So you can define the digitalized language guides by, in the advaisor web app, set the tone. How do you want to come across as a company? Do you want to come across very positively, very formal, maybe a little bit less formal? Do you want to have rather short and sweet sentences, or do you allow for long sentences? How do you treat gender inclusive language? How do you treat formatting things? So all of that can be easily set in a web app, and is later projected to the tools you work in every day. Let's say in Microsoft Word or in your email tool. So this is how it works, and I wanted to show you this stuff, and hopefully this will also be treated later in our Q&A, but that was just a very brief overview of the digitalized language guide. Let me just take one sip of water at this point, and we'll be diving into observing quality levels as the next point. Great. So as you know, enterprises and customer service departments, they hold tons, literally tons of written communication volumes. This might be templates that you use. This might be customer letters that are pre-written. So there is a lot of stuff. And these documents are very often edited or written by different people with different skills and different styles. So even though they are often reused, quality is sometimes poor. However, we really believe to create a great customer experience, these documents are the ones that must be flawless. It just can't be that a template is reused millions or thousands of times and has errors in it or uses jargon that the client does not even understand. At this point, I would also like to show you how you can process all of your templates or all of your documents that you might be holding in your customer service department using the upload in the Advisor web app. You can drag into the web app folders that are of interest for you to analyze and see very easily which of the documents don't comply with a dimension that you set. Here, I would like to show you that some of these documents that we uploaded to check hold too much jargon in there and don't express things as you define it on a quality level. And if you dive into the real-time analysis, you can easily see which of the documents are holding problems and what these problems are. All right, if you found the documents that hold problems and you are motivated to improve the quality of these documents, there is the next, let's say, actionable point that we'd like to present here. And this is diving into templates and snippets and make them really great. It really helps to have great templates because it reduces your average handling time. You don't have to draft every single letter to your customer from zero on, but you can take a pre-existing template and just amend that very quickly and easily. And it's clear that if you are reusing templates over and over, that the quality must be flawless. So how would that look in an example processed by the Advisor web app? You could choose, as shown here, a simple template, and you would instantly see where the problems are. This is a date that does not comply with your formatting, for example. Or the next example, this is German, but natürlich might be perceived as a little bit aggressive if you write that. So this is not optimal. And the app shows you what you can improve. And by clicking on a suggestion, it actually does improve in the text. And you can continue working very easily and quickly. So this is a sort of an automation, and I think it goes very well with the trend that we have seen in the customer service report that I just mentioned. All right, I would like to stop talking at this point and hand over to Mark, who is going to run some questions by you and hopefully show us some of the results that we're getting. And also would like to encourage you to open up for Q&A in just a minute. Mark, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Dimitri, for the quick introduction here on our report. Very interesting indeed. Thanks also for the people who have joined during the session just now. Glad to have you here. If you still could go to the Mentimeter, the link is in the chat on the side. Maybe I can also share the results right here. So while we do that, please feel free to either unmute yourself if you had a question. I saw, Jyoti, that you had one that was more controversial around the usage of templates. Maybe you can either unmute yourself if you want quickly, or otherwise I just go and paraphrase quickly.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
I'll hear you.
Can you?
It's on us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now it works.
Yeah, perfect. No, my question was on templates. I've worked in a bank previously, and what we found was that while it feels like a good idea, if you don't empower the agent to make changes in the templates start becoming a problem, especially if the same customer has written to you twice on a similar problem and he gets a templated response. You start feeling like, you're not being treated like a human being, right? So, I was just wondering, how do we solve for that problem?
Do you want to go, or maybe?
Please.
So, yeah, thanks a lot for the question, and I think it's a very important one, and also something that is maybe underestimated at the moment still. So what we see and what we try to do is really have the template in a very high quality, so that it doesn't come across robotic, that it doesn't come across like out of a can, and then also obviously allow for a lot of customization. And that can be encouraging, for example, to connect initially, pick something up maybe from a previous discussion, also maybe close with something that maybe you are aware that the person was sick, so you hope that you hope that everything is good again, or that there was a child coming in, or right. So you really try to connect and make it as human as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But definitely it's giving freedom, and then also Dimitri showed real quick the solution that we provide is really that while you type, you get support, and then that makes it that you definitely still adhere to the brand voice, even though you change.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I didn't see any typed questions. Sorry. In the thing. Maybe if you go to Mentimeter real quick, for us it's always also interesting who joined. We have seen 4 answers there. With regards to what department you represent, maybe I can share the screen quickly, but you can, I think, go yourself as well. So you should be able to see it. So we see the first answers coming in. So we seem to have a mix. I know, Stella, that you are potentially having selected technology there, not sure. Thanks for joining as well. And then the next one really is just a bit around the quality, right? How important is the quality in your organization when it comes to customer service? Is it a key thing? Is that something where you offer a lot also of support and do reviews? Also feel free to use the comment box at the bottom to maybe add in a little bit more flavor to your answer, or just the chat in the off Zoom actually. Are there further questions from anyone in the chat session? Maybe, yeah, feel free to unmute. I heard an unmute.
Yeah. Jyoti again. I don't have a question, but when you ask people in a survey, even in my earlier organization, we'll always say customer is king. But there's a big difference between what we say and what we actually do. So processes are super complicated. We make life quite difficult. Sometimes the chatbots that companies use are quite ridiculous. So it's not a question, but it's really interesting that who's going to be honest and say that the customer is not important, but my audit and my internal governance is more important. But you can really see that there is a big disconnect in what the company is saying and what we're actually doing.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment, and I think what we also see is there's a lot of cost pressure in the whole customer service, and what we hope that actually will happen is that maybe you have a move away from thinking as a cost center, and we have seen a few companies we talked to that are moving into more let's say profit center setup, where there is a partial responsibility also to do revenues and generate maybe upsells, and then obviously this needs to be done in a proper manner, not to be just a sales and very strong push machine there. And that's definitely a challenge that you can overcome with moving from cost center to profit center. But it's a fair comment as well. Cost.
Just to add to that, it became apparent that roughly only 1/10 of our interviewees to actively measure customer satisfaction scores such as NPS or CSAT. And I think that a little bit emphasizes on what you just said. Even though people say it's very important, actually doing and measuring customer satisfaction seems to be not present everywhere yet.
Do we have other thoughts? Like, feel free to just unmute yourself or type in chat real quick if you had any question. I also liked your comment around that we should call them queen. It's definitely also a trend that we saw when we talked to the people, that gender inclusiveness, gender inclusive language, it's actually a feature we include now, because we see there's a lot of demand to actually, if we had written the report in our own tool, we would have seen that there is a king, and I would assume it would have picked it up. So that's definitely something we see as well. Yeah, maybe a question while we wait for anybody to unmute to Dimitri. What do you, like, from the interviews you held, what do you think is changing in tech support or technology supporting the customer services? What are the next areas where we will see movement there?
I think if you would structure this into, let's say, major themes, there would be almost 3 themes that I would like to emphasize to answer that. One of the themes is definitely upskilling, right? It seems to be that upskilling is almost the basis for anything else. Technology moves so fast, processes change so fast, and typically in customer services, you tend to have higher fluctuation of employees. So you need to put knowledge into your teams over and over again. So that's, I would say, the first thing. The second thing is definitely automation, right? Automation, also powered by technology, can drastically reduce the costs. And I think it can be reduced without impacting the customer satisfaction too much. We talked about sound like a robot if you use templates. That's great automation, but maybe it doesn't serve the needs that you're actually trying to achieve. Because, as mentioned, it seems to be customer is queen or king is still at the top of everyone's mind. And the last, I would say, the last major theme is the complexity of processes that corporates experience right now. Things have been built on top of each other. Things have been integrated. Many vendors have been employed to do one thing, and reducing that and starting maybe from a lower level and to build things intelligently on top of that would definitely support.
Yeah, thanks for exploring this a little bit deeper. I think also what we see obviously is maybe driven by the cost pressure, that there is a lot of interest in digital tools and looking into that. Is there any thoughts around these topics, maybe from the audience? Is anybody wanting to share a little bit? Feel free to just unmute yourself. I think it should be allowed.
Maybe I pick up on a topic that we also briefly touched upon before. Gender inclusive communication seemed to be really on top of everyone's minds, and maybe gender inclusive is not even enough, right? It should be broader than just gender inclusive communication. We tend to call this sensitive language or sensitive communication. With what currently is happening in the US with the entire Black Lives Matter movement, right, is also putting a lot of pressure on leaders in customer communication to cater for everybody and to make communication as inclusive as possible. Because the worst thing that can happen to a brand is being perceived in the wrong way just because there was a mistake in communicating with the customer. So I think this is also an additional trend that is going on, and it's definitely something to be watched closely.
We just received another question here around investing into technology. If we got any comment around how much they want to educate also the customer on the digital tools and technology. Maybe also address a different generation of customers in different cultures as well. Did you come across this in part of your interviews?
Let me just reread the question. I just found it here.
Yes, maybe I get started. I think it's something that comes up or came up here and there. I didn't have it mentioned too much, but definitely also here, I think this will have a shift, right? In the next years, more and more tech savvy people, or the proportion of tech savvy people will just increase. So the upskilling itself will be less and less important. But I think what is the duty of many companies here is also what you mentioned, Joti, before, to make it easy, right? The processes are so difficult. The menus are unclear. You really need an expert sending you, and we still also see a lot of templates there that really give step-by-step instructions. Go there, click this, click this, click this, because it's so unclear. That definitely also there is some homework to be done first to make the tools easier, self-explanatory, but then also find ways to upskill the customers.
I think what I heard in my share of the interviews was I would say rather of a shift to other skills, while reading scripts correctly and adhering to a script was very important. I'd say maybe a couple of years back. People report that things like setting up a chatbot and programming the responses becomes a more asked for skill in customer services roles than, let's say, adhering to a script. So that's maybe something or one example that I came across in my share of the interviews.
But I don't know what your experience with chatbots has been. It's been pretty poor, actually. Like, Singapore Airlines, try and check in, go to the chatbot. It's just, I don't know, my experience has been really poor, actually.
I think what we heard in our discussions was a very high expectation towards chatbots and then a disappointment. Some vendors praise chatbots as AI and this almost robots that can answer anything, and it turns out in the end that some of the chatbots actually being used are rule-based. They basically look for patterns or look for questions, or you even have to click through the chatbot yourself to get to the answer. It's just a customer interface that is now in a chat form rather than a conversational platform. And I think the vendors of chatbots, or some of the vendors, probably have failed to communicate expectations correctly, and this is why there is disappointment around. This is definitely a tone that has been struck quite a few times in our conversations.
Bella from Lecce, sorry to point you out here, but since you're here, how do you see that? How do you experience? I mean, I know that you have a lot of customer requests also coming through the web app. For example, I'm also using your chatbot quite a bit to get in touch. Do you have anything that you would like to comment here?
Hi, Mark.
Hi there.
Yeah, actually, for our side and for our customers, it's very important to have high quality answers because it's a very delicate topic. So chatbots really are not possible for our in-app communication. We do have it on the landing page, kind of qualifying people, but if it's a customer, we can't afford to have a chatbot. Yeah.
If I have you unmuted, is there anything that you are doing to ensure this high quality? Is there any guidelines that you have out there, or how do you go about it?
We try to train employees in an empowering way. I know that sounds funny, but we believe that making mistakes is also human. So you make a mistake and you learn from it, and then you just become a better person to talk to. So when we have internal, maybe educational tools, not in terms of a script or anything, but understanding really the basics of the industry. Because we have the basics done, then you can actually answer the questions, I don't know, out of the blue. So it's really more, yeah, cool. I don't know how it's called, holistic, maybe kind of like medicine. Look at it in a holistic way, yeah.
That's interesting that you mentioned this. We also came across what has been referred to as the forgetting curve, right? It seems that training is effective in the classroom, and once you get out of the classroom and you get into let's say into the wild, where customers get angry and sometimes you're put under stress, that the classroom training is maybe not the best way to do things. In our ideation, we've been thinking a lot about how we can counteract the forgetting curve, especially in communication. If it's real-time communication, that's, I think, very hard. You would almost need to, let's say, give tips in real time, depending on the context that the customer service agent is in. And that's a problem that is very tricky to solve. We're spending quite some thoughts on that, but I think it's not entirely solved. In written communication, obviously, it's easier. Before you press send, you always have this second where you can go through your text and so on and so forth. And the tool that we showed to you, this allows exactly for this. But how do you go about this in voice communication, right? This is, you don't have a send button. It's, you know, the words that they just come out, and if it's the wrong ones, yeah, you might be running into a problem. Obviously, something to continue watching.
Right, and also we see actually a spillover from learning in one context that can be written or voice to the respectively other. Right, if you pay more attention on how you write and make sure that you are sticking to the rules, you will also do over time get better when you speak. So this is definitely interlinked, and one links a bit to the other as well. Are there any questions? Bella, do you have a question for us?
It actually goes a little bit back to the NPS conversation when you said that only 1/10 of people actually utilize it. Did you maybe ask them why they don't? The 90% don't do it?
We didn't ask them specifically. There was no question in our survey that went that far. But I think from the tone that we've heard, it was a lot about implementation, right? So it's kind of a change for an organization of certain size to suddenly start measuring NPS, right? And to get to that change, you need to mobilize people. You need to maybe also risk something and go for a vendor that you haven't worked with before. So I almost would guess that the reasons that so many organizations don't measure NPS lies in the difficulties to change. For smaller companies, on the other hand, I would say there is almost out-of-the-box solution for that. And if you have smaller teams, if you have maybe shorter decision cycles, then that shouldn't be as complex as in the larger organizations. But I'm also open to to discuss whether you agree with that in general.
Yeah, maybe just to add on, I think normally what we see also these companies are on a maturity curve. And many are still focused maybe on the lower maturity things to do. Say they focus more on how fast can we do it, how fast can we answer, how good is our internal wiki to find the answers, how fast can we find the answers within the organization. So we heard a lot of stories of finding the right answer within the organization, taking a lot of time. And then the more you move down the maturity curve and the more mature an organization becomes, the more also then they're open to try this, and maybe also they feel confident that they actually can improve on NPS. Once you start measuring this, it can also be a disappointment. So you get these low scores, and but that's you basically already know that you don't have the best scores, and so basically do your homework first, move up the maturity curve, and then start measuring maybe a little bit later is maybe what they do, what opt for.
I think that's a great point. I think it's spot on. The maturity curve. Would you say that time to resolution versus time to response is a matter of importance in NPS? Maybe did you hear any of that?
So I think what normally the customer wants is assurance that it's been worked on, update when it takes longer. Right? Some people, you're not so much offended if it takes longer when you know, hey, it's happening, giving you an update, hey, I'm still checking, look at this and this I already found out, this and this is still pending. What you don't like is there is a week of silence.
And generally what we hear, and that was a little bit of a surprise to us, we hear that first contact resolution is far more important than the length of how long it takes you to solve the problem. It's really important that if you get a response and if you get a solution, that it works from the first time, and you don't have to loop back and call organizations up. It seems that FCR, or first contact resolution, is just so much above anything else at this point.
Yeah. Trying to reduce this back and forth, this ping pong, this famous ping pong. You don't ask any question, all the question, then you need to ask back. Client gets frustrated. Oh, but I sent you. Why didn't you ask me before? And this is very frustrating. And the more they can answer in the first time, obviously that's also reducing the amount of tickets and also having a positive impact on cost as well as customer happiness. The rest of the group, I don't know, Victoria, Lorty, Ivan, Andre, do you have any comments, questions, inputs that you would like to share? If that is not the case, maybe we can also slowly get into closing mode here. I would only ask you to, I should have opened it to your own speed now to go through the last two questions. It's really about the session, if you found this useful, if it was actionable for you, and if also the length with 1 hour is good. And then if you type next, then basically you can also have a look quickly on what you liked more, what was the most useful. That's always very helpful for us to just improve and iterate as well. Does it work with the home pace? Yeah, it seems to work for some. Also, you can click now next yourself, right? I don't think I need to guide anymore. So feel free, that would be wonderful if you could leave your comment there. Also feel free to leave any other comment, either also by email to us. Maybe I just type quickly our emails as well.
Great. Also from my side, thank you very much for participating and for all your questions. What we would like to encourage everyone is to also get in touch with us. If you're obviously you will be getting the report as a follow-up and also some additional material. If you're interested to download the generic language guide and reuse that, please feel free to do that. What we'll be also able to provide you, if you wanted to test how the advisor tool works and how it could help you in your customer interactions, please also feel free to reach out. We do have trials that we can offer and discuss potential use cases that you might have. And before I end on this note, maybe a quick look over to Mark, if you have anything else on your agenda.
Nothing then. Thanks again for joining us and wishing you a lovely evening or whatever time you happen to be